Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dailey Blend show with me, Reed Dailey. If you are new around here, this is the weekly rundown where I feature things that I thought were notable or interesting. If you do join in, you'll notice that we're finally bringing back the weekly rundown, but in a new format. So we're always going to do the Friday Top 5. That's 5 things I thought were interesting, notable, and culturally significant. And the weekly rundown is going to feature, or rather showcase is probably a better way to describe it, things that are going on in and around Dailey Blend, things that I'm participating in, and things that friends of mine are doing that I sort of wanted to curate and highlight to the masses. Before we jump in, all ideas, thoughts are my own. Also, if you want to, you can follow, subscribe Dailey Blend on social media. You can also subscribe to this show on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and the shows are put up on YouTube. With all that out of the way, let's jump into the show. So, the first thing is I want to talk about some sports. When you think about me, I like to go to sports, but I don't necessarily talk about them. But getting pretty excited here. Couple things that happened over the last couple days. First of all, I went to my first Milwaukee Bucks home game. I got to go see my Atlanta Hawks play, so it was a nice sort of home team, former home team. And if you've ever looked at where I live in Lake Forest, we are 2 minutes difference between downtown Milwaukee and downtown Chicago. So I have Bulls gear. I don't have any Bucks gear yet, but I'm going to get some. And I also spent half of my life in Atlanta. So it's sort of a triangle of teams. I'm going to root for the Bucks and the Bulls for the most part. But if the Hawks are in town, I'm going to go check out the game. The Hawks crushed the Bucks. I had probably the highest seats in the whole stadium behind the basketball hoop. I think it was the second to the last row. They were $3 and worth every penny of it. In terms of EPL, we had Man City losing to Brentford. I had to look up who Brentford was, 1-3. And we got the Dallas Cowboys going 17 unanswered points to lose to the Cowboys. So it was not a good look for my America's team Cowboys. Now, the biggest thing that we got to talk about is the World Cup. So it's coming up. We got the first game on Monday. I am pretty fired up, starting to see on the social media all the U.S. national team players sort of landing in Qatar and getting ready for the tournament. It will be very interesting to see how this tournament unfolds. Usually the World Cup is in the summertime when the pro teams typically have their break outside of maybe the MLS. And, there is that sort of international break, certainly in the EPL. I don't know if they do that in the other leagues, but you're going to see a little bit of overlap for breaks, I guess, for these big-time players. And, I hope they feel fresh coming off of their respective seasons, jumping into this World Cup. I'm looking forward to seeing the stadiums and kind of just, watching the games. So good luck to the USA. Moving from the world of sports to things going on in and around Chicago, which is where I reside, my favorite Chicago retailer, Notre, or Notre Shop, is released, I should say, their collaboration with Converse. It's drawing inspiration from aesthetics of decor, the timeless elements that transform a living space into a home. It's utilizing 2 street icons, the One Star and Chuck 70, and they use some sort of rich palette mixed of materials and elevated techniques to nod to a well-crafted furniture, patchwork textiles, and ceramics. The designs deploy a thoughtful combination of canvas and vintage suede, stitching together distinct textual elements in a precise way. It's an elegant translation of the carefully curated things that make a home a home. So that might be the single greatest description of what a shoe looks like. Based on the images that I've seen, there's really 3 different styles. There's more of a white style that is pretty traditional in terms of just the Converse low. Then they have this sort of patchwork. It almost looks like blue jean material, and it's a series of patchworks, and that is a high top. And then they have what looks to me like more of a brown sort of textile looking shoe. That of all the shoes, that's the one that I'm most interested in. What's kind of cool is they do some lacing loophole in the back of the heel, so the laces actually loop around the shoe. But, if you follow me on social and this show, you know I'm a huge sneakerhead. And what I really like about what Notre does is not only do they release products, but there is a very clear and distinct story here. And over the weekend, they had some folks come in and talk about the art of furniture design and, spatial design. And I'm a big fan of how Notre has taken advantage of what used to be an art gallery, which is where their home retail location is in the West Loop. And they have a massive area in the front of the store that they host, we'll call it cultural events. If you live in Chicago or are considering visiting, I highly recommend signing up for their email subscription newsletter and then following them on social so you can check out future events that come up. Other things to highlight in and around Chicago. So as I was looking through Thanksgiving and the holiday season, I came across Emma Krupp, who is the editor of Time Out Chicago, and she's got a list of, I think, like 10 or 15 really incredible things to do in and around Chicago. One of those things is experiential Hogwarts event happening in and around Chicago. For me, I've liked all of the movies. I've read a couple of the books. So going to check that out and bringing my kid and my wife will be pretty fun. Hats off to the team at Time Out for putting this list together. Also, if you are in the West Loop, go check out the food court that they've got. It's really good. I'm always a big fan. I always stop in there and have a bite to eat when I'm in town. Next, let's talk about friends doing cool things. A buddy of mine down in Atlanta, Neil Popevis and Stacy Jordan, put together a children's book, The Little Newt Under the Root. And from the looks of it, I haven't talked with Neil in length, but he wrote the book, and then Stacy Jordan did all the illustrations. It is a book, and then there is sort of like an activity book that comes along with it. I've got my order teed up with Amazon. I haven't received my book yet, but I will let you know how it goes. But pretty cool to see friends doing different things than I will call their 9-to-5 jobs. And this is definitely not Neil's 9-to-5 job, but I know him. I know his love for his family. He's a big family guy. And the fact that he was able to write a children's book totally makes sense for him. I think his hashtag that he uses on a lot of social media is #1 dad. And sometimes I'll DM him and be like, yeah, I'm #2 dad. But anyway, so hats off to Neil and Stacy for their book. Looking forward to checking that out and reading that with my kid. Okay, so we go from children's books to adult beverages. And if you've been following my social, a few weeks ago, I started posting more content on Negronis with Greg. And what that really is it's a show with my buddy Greg Larson where we run through Matt Horanik's book about Negronis. There are 31 recipes in the book. We're not going to just stick to Matt's book. We're going to throw in a couple other canned cocktails and our own riffs. But essentially, it's Greg and I running through recipes of Negronis, kind of commenting and scoring on the book or recipe. And it's just a whole lot of fun. Episode number 1 is already out on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And episode number 2 will be releasing tomorrow. So that's Wednesday. What is Wednesday? Today is the 15th of November. So it will be the 16th of November. And go check that out. It's going to be available, or it is available on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you are out there and you own a Negroni beverage company, or you make Negronis, send us cans or products or bottles, and we will run it through its paces on the show. All right, so if you follow Dailey Blend, you know that I'm typically putting up mostly stories about travel and adventures and kind of curation, but also major music fan. I tend to stick with electronic music, although as I've gotten older, gotten way more into classic rock, jam bands, and even some jazz and funk. But Complexion is a DJ that I got turned on to by actually Greg from Negronis with Greg, and I think he's a Londoner, and he's on BBC Radio 1 Extra, from what I've read on his on website material on him. But he makes these just fantastic, like 45-minute to an hour mixes. Sometimes they're a little shorter, sometimes they're a little louder. There's always some bootlegs and remixes on there that I'm just like, oh man, I love that song, and I love it in this sort of like down tempo vibe. So I would compare it to, if you like Drake and that sort of like down-tempo, low-key sound, you're going to like his DJ sets. I've linked to his website and his SoundCloud page. The most recent episode of his podcast, which I think, or mix show, is I think episode 143 or could be 134, not sure. But I linked to it on Dailey Blend, and you can find it by searching for Complexion on the site. I have to jump from, talking about someone else's mixes to my own. So if you don't know, I've been doing a DJ mix show for roughly 15 years. It had a different name at one point, but we finally landed on Dailey Blend podcast, and it's basically like an hour of house and tech house. And I just launched episode number 146. You can get it on SoundCloud and Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and YouTube. You cannot get it on Spotify just from a licensing standpoint. Spotify will not approve that. I also want to mention that because we're going to start turning on monetization for YouTube, we actually are going to start removing the mix shows from the Dailey Blend Show YouTube channel. So that will stay the same, and we're going to bring all the mix shows to a new YouTube channel. So YouTube just launched the @ sign, so it's at Dailey Blend podcast, and you'll be able to download probably like 20 or 30 of the past episodes. I'm not going to bring all 160 over. It's just too time consuming. I don't even think I still have some of those, but you'll be able to listen to them, I'm sure, because some of the material is, copyrighted and it's a mix show. YouTube will block some of those things. It's just the nature of the beast, but you can always check them out on SoundCloud, Apple Podcast. I try to cite all of the artists on the mix compilations, so hats off to all the artists making great music out there. All right, so in terms of daily adventures, so I've been a little negligent to this part of Dailey Blend. And I've been doing a ton of travels. I went to Las Vegas, I went to Austin, Texas, I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so I think I'm going to sort of put my 24 hours, it was actually more like 48 hours, in Las Vegas. I'm not a big gambler, so going to Las Vegas to hit the casinos is not really my shtick. But there's so much other fun stuff to do in and around Las Vegas. And then soon after, I'll do some on Austin, Texas, and Grand Rapids. So I'll keep the listeners or you folks up to date on what or when the content is out on Dailey Blend. If you have ideas for Austin, Texas, and Las Vegas, shoot those my way. I'm going to be going down there a bit more, most likely, and always looking for something fun and new. Okay, we started the show talking about sports, and I suppose just thinking about this logically, I should have put the paddle update next to the professional soccer, but it just feels so sad of how unfit I am. But so I play what's called platform tennis or paddle, and I'm on Series 25, and because I actually really like it, and I'm subpar at best, but, decent enough, I figured it might be fun to highlight what I've been doing and how my team's doing. So in the show notes and on daileyblend.com, I have linked the website where you can find our Series 25 team and my records. You can also find some videos that I've highlighted on how to play the game. It's basically tennis, but a third of the size with the net the same height. The ball bounces, so it's kind of like racquetball, but you're outside. And there's chicken wire fence around the court. So it's a whole lot of fun. It's a winter sport. If you live in sort of a colder climate, you will see it. If you live in a warmer climate, you're probably not going to see it. All right, moving back to music. and I think probably need to think through the order and structure of this weekly rundown for future shows. But hey, it's the first one in this new format. So on last week, we featured Tiesto's Throwback Thursday mix. Was his In Search of Sunrise Volume 3. This was like my go-to mix for studying in undergrad and maybe a little bit into grad school. Because of this mix, I learned about Josh Gabriel and then Gabriel and Dresden, and really got into Gabriel and Dresden in the early 2000s. So go check it out. It's a little bit trancey, but down tempo. It is like my go-to like early morning or late night mix. It's perfect to knock out like a ton of action items. That's how I think about mixes, is like, do I want to dance to this or do work to it? All right, closing it out, let's talk about kind of sneaker losses, L's and W's. So I took some L's on the sneaker app with the LeBron Dunks, sort of gutted about those. Those were pretty fun. Took a W with the the Croc Echoes. So these look like kind of like Yeezys and kind of like Selham Bari, and I know I'm crushing that poor guy's name. They're a little different on the inside than traditional Crocs. Follow my Instagram stories and you'll see a picture of these, but they're a little more expensive than regular Crocs, and they look like clouds or waves, as my child described them, and they are extremely comfortable. For those looking for some fresh new footwear for the holidays, Nike's basically doing 60% off. Adidas is doing $50 shoes. If you need some new shoes, like I always need, now's the time. All right, so let's just talk about last week's Friday Top 5, just to kind of close things out. So was able to feature Victoria Rose. She's a fitness and nutritionist coach. I actually found her through Instagram on some of her recipes, and then got to check out some of her fitness material. I'm going to be jumping into some of her recipes. So Victoria, if you are listening to this, send me what your favorites are, and I'll highlight that on this show. Obviously, we talked about getting closer to the World Cup. Chris Bunn put out basically his interpretation of what the U.S. national team should have done with their jerseys. If you looked at the white or home and away jerseys, they're just terrible looking. And Chris's are fantastic. He did a home, away, and a sort of third jersey, which was black with gold. I didn't think I'd like it at first. Then I saw some pictures after reading the description. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. We featured John Geiger. So he is a shoe designer and manufacturer. He does limited edition shoes. They are heavily inspired by other shoe brands, namely Nike. He's got a sort of Air Force One looking shoe that came out, and I believe he has to change the design of it based on some feedback from the courts. But I'm a big fan. I think they look great. I'm going to try to order a pair of silver ones, kind of look pretty good in my opinion. And then because we're getting close to year end, and I like to send nice letters to folks, but my handwriting is so bad, I'm going to be checking out Audience. We've featured this and sort of provided a video. It's essentially you type up your letter in text form and then submit it through their portal or their platform, if you will. And then machines are actually holding a pen and writing the note in sort of a handwritten format. I think they've got 16 different variations of their handwriting. Don't quote me on the exact number, but the letters get sent, including the envelope with sort of handwriting notes, and it's pretty personal, and you don't look dopey for having terrible handwriting and spelling things bad. All right, so that wraps it up for this week's episode of the Weekly Rundown. I know we had been doing these about a year and a half ago, and they were a slightly different format. I kind of dig this format. I'm interested what you guys think, so hit me up at Dailey Blend or at Read Daily on Twitter. Obviously, Twitter is having some interesting times thanks to Elon Musk, but thank you guys for tuning in, and don't forget to like, follow, subscribe the show on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, etc. And don't forget to check out daileyblend.com. And with all that said, we'll catch you on Friday for the Friday Top 5. Thanks for tuning in.